The opulent high-end group office, a testament to gushy Ching's success, hummed with a nervous energy. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off the polished mahogany desk where Ching sat, a stack of oddly specific questionnaires before him. His jaw ticked, a familiar twitch that appeared whenever his grandmother's matrimonial demands pressed upon him. He glanced at the digital clock, 2:22 p.m. An auspicious number, he thought, a flicker of superstition crossing his meticulously composed face. He needed this charade over with. This ludicrous interview process. A girlfriend interview. The very concept felt absurd, a desperate measure to silence his grandmother's incessant matchmaking attempts. The first candidate, a bubbly woman in a pink dress, fidgeted under his gaze. He picked up her questionnaire. "So, Miss Lee, you prefer odd numbers?" His voice was flat, betraying none of the turmoil churning within. Why did Grandma insist on this detail? What correlation could there possibly be between marital bliss and a preference for prime numbers? "Well, Mr. Ching, I find them more dynamic, more interesting." Miss Lee's voice trailed off, her smile faltering. Ching's internal monologue continued its cynical commentary. Dynamic? Interesting? This is a life partner, not a mathematical theorem. He made a small, almost imperceptible, mark on her application. Another rejection. The next few candidates fared no better. One confessed to a fear of even numbers, her eyes widening in horror when Ching casually mentioned his obsession. Another rambled about her extensive collection of ceramic cats, a detail that did nothing to quell the rising tide of irritation within him. He checked his watch again, 2:34 p.m. The even numbers mocked him. He was about to call off the entire charade when the final candidate walked in. Jinxie. Her name, a peculiar blend of fortune and misfortune, resonated with a strange dissonance that caught his attention. Unlike the others, she didn't fidget. Her movements were fluid, graceful, her gaze steady, almost unnervingly so. She wore a simple, elegant dress, the color of twilight, that accentuated the sharp lines of her collarbones and the subtle curve of her jaw. Ching felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt with the other candidates' intrigue. Jinxie assessed the situation with a swift, calculating glance. The opulent office, the bored-looking assistant, and the man behind the desk, his expression a carefully constructed mask of indifference. Desperate, she concluded, her mind already racing, formulating a strategy. Her sister, Chu Yangi, her voice strained with desperation on the phone earlier, echoed in her ears. "Mother's surgery, the bills, we need the money, Jinxie." The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, a familiar ache. This charade, this ridiculous interview, was her only option. Ching began his usual line of questioning, but Jinxie interrupted him, her voice calm, measured. "Mr. Ching," she began, a hint of amusement playing at the corners of her lips, "I understand your particular requirements. But I'm not good at dealing with new products." She paused, her eyes meeting his directly, "but I am good at finding you a girlfriend. I promise I'll find the best girlfriend for you in 5 minutes." Ching blinked, taken aback by her audacity. His initial reaction was annoyance, but a flicker of amusement, unexpected and unwelcome, danced within him. This woman, this Jinxie, was different. He found himself intrigued, almost against his will. What is she playing at? "And how, Miss Jinxie, do you propose to accomplish this feat?" he asked, his voice laced with skepticism, his eyes searching hers for a tell. Jinxie's internal monologue buzzed with a cynical humor. "Play along, Jinxie. Play along. You and your heart, please." She gestured towards him, her expression a perfect blend of sincerity and subtle mockery. Ching felt a surge of inexplicable irritation. This woman was toying with him. Yet, a part of him, a small, rebellious part, admired her boldness. He glanced at his watch. 2:58 p.m. 2 minutes to go. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on her. Fine. Let's see what this charade entails. Very well, Miss Jinxie. Convince me. His voice was a low murmur, a challenge hanging in the air between them. Jinxie's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of information she had gleaned about him. The even number obsession, the grandmother's pressure, the sheer desperation emanating from him. She took a deep breath, composing her features into an expression of gentle understanding. Mr. Ching, you don't need a girlfriend in the traditional sense. You need a solution. A way to appease your grandmother, to fulfill your filial duty, without disrupting your life. She paused, her words hanging in the air, allowing them to sink in. Ching's internal monologue stuttered to a halt. She had hit the nail on the head. He didn't want a girlfriend, not really. He wanted peace. He wanted an end to the endless nagging, the suffocating pressure. He wanted even numbers on his clock. He looked at her, a flicker of understanding, of reluctant admiration, dawning in his eyes. Jinxie continued, her voice soft, persuasive. I can be that solution. I can be the perfect contract girlfriend. I'll play the part, attend the family dinners, appease your grandmother, and in return, she paused, letting the implication hang in the air. And in return? Ching prompted, his voice barely a whisper, his gaze locked on hers. In return, Jinxie replied, her voice steady, her eyes holding his, you compensate me for my services. A mutually beneficial arrangement. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken agreements and hidden motives. Ching looked at his watch. 3 p.m. An even number. He nodded, a slow, almost reluctant movement. Very well, Miss Jinxie. You're hired. That evening, Jinxie stood before the imposing gates of Ching's mansion, a single suitcase at her side. The weight of her decision settled heavily upon her. This charade, this contract, was a dangerous game. But for her sister, for her mother, she was willing to play. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, and stepped inside. The game had begun. The biting soul wind whipped strands of Jinxie's hair across her face as she hurried across the street, her worn leather handbag clutched tightly against her side. High-end Group towered above her, a gleaming monolith of glass and steel, a stark contrast to the gnawing anxiety that churned in her stomach. Each echoing click of her heels against the pavement seemed to amplify the precariousness of her situation. Chu Yangyi's frantic call still reverberated in her ears, the desperation in her sister's voice a painful reminder of the mounting hospital bills. Jinxie's carefully constructed composure threatened to crumble under the weight of it all. She hadn't even reached the interview yet, and already she felt the crushing weight of failure pressing down on her. What if this ludicrous plan didn't work? What if this contract girlfriend scheme was nothing more than a cruel joke of fate? The screech of tires tore through her thoughts. A flash of metallic blue, a horn blaring its desperate warning, then the jarring impact. The world spun, a kaleidoscope of blurred colors and disorienting sensations. The cold asphalt scraped against her cheek, a stinging reminder of the sudden violence. For a moment, Jinxie lay there, stunned, the breath knocked out of her lungs. The city noise, usually a constant hum in the background, seemed to fade, replaced by the throbbing pulse in her ears. This can't be happening, she thought, her mind struggling to catch up. Not now, not when I'm so close. A concerned murmur rippled through the gathering crowd. Someone offered a hand, helping her to sit up. Jinxie touched her cheek gingerly, her fingers coming away smeared with blood. She looked up at the driver, a young man with wide, frightened eyes, stumbling out of the expensive-looking car. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words seemed to catch in his throat. The initial shock gave way to a surge of anger, a burning ember in the pit of her stomach. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Help. You hit someone and you're not taking responsibility. Her voice, though shaky, carried an unexpected strength. She had to fight. For Chu Yangi, for her mother, she had to fight. The young man fumbled for words, his face paling. He looked around nervously, as if hoping the ground would swallow him whole. I didn't see you, he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes darted around the growing crowd, his gaze settling on a young woman holding a phone, its screen pointed directly at him. Jinxie followed his gaze, her eyes narrowing. The woman, dressed in brightly colored clothing, held the phone aloft, a determined glint in her eyes. I've recorded the entire process, the woman declared, her voice clear and confident. I can't let you be bullied. A strange mix of gratitude and unease washed over Jinxie. This unexpected intervention, broadcast live to who knew how many viewers, was surreal. Her private struggle was suddenly public, her pain and desperation laid bare for all to see. A part of her recoiled from the exposure, the invasion of privacy. But another part, the pragmatic, desperate part, recognized the opportunity. This could work in her favor. She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. The young man, clearly flustered by the presence of the live streamer, offered to take her to the hospital. Jinxie, her mind already racing ahead, calculating her next move, accepted. The hospital was a sterile, brightly lit space, a stark contrast to the chaotic scene on the street. The doctor, after a thorough examination, assured her that her injuries were minor, mostly superficial. She'd need a few stitches and some rest, but nothing serious. Relief washed over her, a fragile wave against the tide of her anxieties. She had dodged a bullet, both literally and figuratively. The young man, who introduced himself as Fu Boya, hovered nervously nearby, apologizing profusely. Jinxie observed him, her gaze sharp and assessing. He seemed genuinely remorseful, his concern bordering on excessive. Was he truly this kind, or was it an act, a performance for the benefit of the unseen audience watching through the live stream? She couldn't be sure. As the doctor tended to her wounds, Jinxie's thoughts returned to the interview, the reason she had been rushing across the street in the first place. The contract. The money. It felt like a lifetime ago, though barely an hour had passed. She glanced at her phone, the cracked screen a testament to the impact. The battery was almost dead. A wave of despair washed over her. She had missed the interview. Missed her chance. Suddenly, her phone buzzed, the vibration surprisingly loud in the quiet room. A message from an unknown number. MS. It read, "We saw the live stream. We admire your spirit. Come to Haiyan Group tomorrow. We'd like to offer you the position." Jinxie stared at the message, her heart pounding in her chest. Disbelief warred with a surge of something akin to hope. It was absurd. Unbelievable. But it was real. The accident, the live stream, the chaos, it had all somehow led to this. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, the antiseptic smell of the hospital filling her lungs. She had to tell Chu Yangi. She had to tell her mother. Everything was going to be all right. She would have the money. She would save her family. The next day, standing before the imposing doors of Haiyan Group, Jinxie felt a strange sense of calm. The whirlwind of the previous day, the accident, the live stream, the unexpected job offer, it all felt like a dream. But the dull ache in her cheek, the bandaged cut a constant reminder, grounded her in the reality of her situation. She took another deep breath, smoothing down her borrowed suit, and pushed open the doors. The cool, air-conditioned air washed over her, a welcome respite from the summer heat. She walked towards the reception desk, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor, each step a testament to her resilience, her determination. This was it. The beginning of a new chapter. A chapter filled with uncertainty, with potential danger, but also, she hoped, with a chance at a better life. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor echoed the relentless thump in Gushi Qing's chest. His grandmother, frail yet formidable, lay in the sterile white hospital bed, her hand gripping his with surprising strength. "Qing," she rasped, her voice thin but resolute, "I won't rest until I see you settled. A wife, grandchildren, it's all I ask." Qing felt a familiar wave of guilt wash over him. He knew his grandmother's health was failing, and her only desire was to see him happy, or at least what she perceived as happy. He squeezed her hand, the smooth coolness of her skin a stark contrast to the heat rising in his own face. A wife. The thought sent a shiver down his spine, not of anticipation, but of pure, unadulterated dread. He mumbled something about focusing on his business, a well-rehearsed deflection, but his grandmother's gaze remained sharp, unwavering. "She sees right through me," he thought miserably. "Just like she always does." Leaving the hospital, Qing felt the weight of her words pressing down on him. The even, rhythmic click of his shoes against the pavement offered little solace. 2 clicks, then 2 more. Even numbers. His small comfort in a world that felt increasingly chaotic. He needed a solution, and quickly. His mind drifted back to the peculiar interviews he conducted earlier that day, the parade of unsuitable candidates blurring into a single, unsettling image. And then, he remembered her. The woman with the unusual name, Jinxie. There was something about her, a quiet confidence, a sharp intelligence that glimmered beneath the surface. A flicker of desperation, too, he realized now, remembering the tightness around her eyes. Desperation can be useful, a cynical voice whispered in his mind. He found her details amongst the discarded resumes, her phone number penned in elegant script. 2 rings. 4 rings. He counted, almost unconsciously. "Hello." Her voice, smooth as polished jade, sent an unexpected ripple through him. He cleared his throat. "MS. It's Gushi Qing. I have a proposition for you." Jinxie sat perched on the edge of her sister's hospital bed, the sterile scent of disinfectant heavy in the air. Yangi, her face pale against the white pillow, clutched her hand. "Did you get the broadcasting job, Jinxie?" she asked, her voice weak. Jinxie's heart ached. Her sister's mounting medical bills were a suffocating weight, a constant reminder of her own inadequacy. "Not yet," she lied, forcing a reassuring smile. "But something will come through." The sudden ringing of her phone sliced through the quiet tension. Gushi Qing. The eccentric millionaire with the unnerving even-number obsession. Jinxie's mind raced. His call was unexpected, unwelcome, and yet a flicker of possibility ignited within her. "A proposition?" she echoed, her voice carefully neutral as she stepped into the hospital corridor. "I'm listening." Qing explained his predicament, his words clipped and precise. His grandmother, his need for a temporary girlfriend, a contract. Jinxie listened intently, her mind calculating, weighing the risks and rewards. This was unorthodox, to say the least. But desperation, as Qing had unknowingly surmised, could be a powerful motivator. "And the compensation?" she asked, her voice betraying none of her inner turmoil. Qing named a figure, a substantial sum, enough to cover a significant portion of Yangi's medical expenses. Jinxie drew a sharp breath. This could be the answer to her prayers, a chance to finally alleviate her sister's suffering. I have conditions, she stated, her voice now firm, resolute. Qing's sigh was audible even over the phone. Conditions? Of course. If you don't have anything to say, keep your mouth shut, he muttered under his breath before speaking into the phone again. Name them. Jinxie laid out her terms, each one carefully calculated, designed not only to benefit her financially but to protect herself from this strange, unpredictable man. Increased compensation, a clearly defined time frame, and absolute discretion. Qing listened, his silence heavy with unspoken reservations. She's shrewd, he thought, a grudging respect growing within him. More than I anticipated. Fine, he finally agreed, his voice strained. I'll sign a contract with you and make you my contract girlfriend. He could almost hear the gears turning in her head, the silent calculation before she finally responded. Agreed. The word hung in the air between them, a single syllable heavy with unspoken implications. The contract signing took place in Qing's opulent office, the sheer extravagance of the space making Jinxie acutely aware of the vast chasm that separated their worlds. He offered her a drink, something amber and swirling in a crystal glass. She declined, her gaze fixed on the document in front of her. Every clause, every sub-clause, was meticulously scrutinized. Qing watched her, his expression unreadable. She's thorough, he noted, a flicker of annoyance mixing with his earlier respect. Almost too thorough. Everything seems to be in order, Jinxie finally said, her voice betraying nothing of the relief that flooded through her. She signed her name with a flourish, the ink a stark black against the pristine white paper. Qing followed suit, his signature precise, controlled. 2 identical copies. Even numbers. He handed her one, their fingers brushing briefly. An unexpected jolt passed between them, a spark of something indefinable. They both quickly withdrew their hands, the silence in the room suddenly thick with unspoken tension. So, Qing began, his voice stiff, when can you move in? The question hung in the air, charged with an awkwardness neither of them knew how to navigate. Jinxie considered her options. Yangi was stable for now. Tomorrow, she replied, her voice calm, betraying none of the whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. Tomorrow. A new chapter. A dangerous game. She met Qing's gaze, a flicker of steel in her eyes. She was ready. Or at least, she told herself she was. As she left his office, the rhythmic click of her heels against the marble floor echoed in the vast, empty space. 2 clicks. 4 clicks. Even numbers. A small, ironic comfort in a world that was about to become infinitely more complicated. The antiseptic smell of the hospital clung to Jinxie's clothes, a stark contrast to the cloying sweetness of the cheap air freshener in her cramped apartment. Her sister, Chu Yangi, sat perched on the edge of a plastic chair, her face etched with worry lines that belied her youthful age. Their mother lay in the next room, a fragile landscape of tubes and monitors, the rhythmic beep a constant reminder of the precariousness of life. Jinxie's stomach twisted. The doctor's words echoed in her ears, the surgery is crucial. We need to operate as soon as possible. Possible. Such a small word carrying the weight of a mountain. A mountain of medical bills. Did you talk to him? Yangi's voice was barely a whisper, laced with a desperation Jinxie knew all too well. It mirrored her own. Jinxie shook her head, the fluorescent lights reflecting in the unshed tears gathering in her eyes. He hasn't responded. I don't think streaming is going to cut it, Yangi. The thought of performing, of putting on a brave face for a virtual audience while her world crumbled around her, felt like a cruel joke. Yangi stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the linoleum floor, a sharp sound that grated on Jinxie's already frayed nerves. Then what are we going to do? Let Mom die? Her voice cracked, a raw edge of hysteria bleeding through. Jinxie flinched. Not at the accusation, but at the fear she saw reflected in her sister's eyes. The same fear that gnawed at her own insides. Jinxie's mind raced. The bizarre interview, the eccentric Gushi Qing with his even-number obsession, it felt absurd, a ridiculous pantomime in the face of real tragedy. But what choice did she have? Pride? Dignity? Those were luxuries she couldn't afford. There might be another way, she said slowly, each word heavy with the weight of her decision. She described the offer, the contract, the sheer implausibility of it all. Yangi's initial shock morphed into a calculating gleam. A contract girlfriend? Are you serious? Jinxie, this is, she paused, searching for the right word, insane. But another pause, longer this time, filled with the silent hum of the hospital machinery. But it could work. Jinxie stared at her sister, a mixture of disbelief and a chilling sense of inevitability washing over her. This was wrong, all wrong. But the image of her mother, pale and frail in the hospital bed, burned in her mind. It feels dirty, she whispered, more to herself than to Yangi. Yangi's eyes hardened. We're both Mom's daughters. Do you really want me to die? The words hung in the air, sharp and accusatory. Jinxie felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She knew Yangi was manipulating her, playing on her guilt, but the truth was, she was right. Jinxie would do anything for her family. Even this. She closed her eyes, the sterile scent of the hospital filling her lungs, suffocating her. When she opened them again, the decision had been made. A quiet resolve settled over her, a mask to hide the turmoil within. Later that day, Jinxie found herself standing in front of Gushi Qing's opulent apartment building, the sleek glass and steel a stark contrast to her own modest dwelling. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. This was it. No turning back. The apartment itself was a testament to Qing's eccentricity. Everything came in pairs. 2 identical sofas, 2 identical coffee tables, even 2 identical, slightly unnerving porcelain cats perched on the mantelpiece. Qing himself seemed oblivious to the strangeness of it all, his focus entirely on the contract, meticulously laid out on the table between them. He looked up, his expression unreadable. So, Miss he began, his voice smooth and businesslike. You understand the terms of this agreement? Jinxie nodded, her throat suddenly dry. She scanned the document, the legal jargon blurring in her vision. Money. Dates. Appearances. A carefully constructed lie. Yes, she managed, her voice barely a whisper. Internally, her thoughts swirled. This is it. This is my life now. Excellent, Qing replied, a flicker of a smile playing on his lips. Then welcome aboard, Miss He. I trust this arrangement will be mutually beneficial. He handed her a check, the amount making her head spin. Enough to cover her mother's surgery and more. Jinxie's fingers trembled as she took the check. Thank you, Mr. Gushi. The words felt hollow, devoid of genuine gratitude. Beneficial? For whom? She thought bitterly. One more thing, Qing added as Jinxie turned to leave. He gestured towards a suitcase already packed and waiting by the door. My grandmother insists you move in immediately. She's eager to meet her future granddaughter-in-law. Jinxie stared at the suitcase, her mind reeling. This was happening so fast, a whirlwind of events she couldn't control. She felt a pang of longing for the familiarity of her own small apartment, even with its peeling paint and leaky faucet. But the weight of the check in her hand was a constant reminder of her obligations. "Of course," she said, her voice flat. "What choice do I have?" She picked up the suitcase, the weight of it mirroring the weight in her heart. Later, as she settled into the unfamiliar luxury of her new room, the events of the day replayed in her mind. The sterile hospital, her sister's desperate plea, Gushi Qing's impassive face, the hefty check. She opened her purse and took out a crumpled photograph of her mother, her smile warm and genuine. "I'm doing this for you, Mom," she whispered, clutching the photograph to her chest. "I hope you understand." The next morning, Gushi Qing stood before her, two identical cups of coffee in his hands. "My grandmother will be joining us for breakfast," he informed her, his tone as neutral as ever. He handed her a cup. She's enthusiastic. Jinxie took the coffee, the warmth of the mug a small comfort in the face of the impending interrogation. She forced a smile. "I look forward to meeting her." "Lie," a small voice whispered in her head. As they walked towards the dining room, Jinxie couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a carefully crafted illusion, a gilded cage of her own making. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint aroma of antiseptic that still clung to her clothes, a constant reminder of the price of this charade. She glanced at Gushi Qing, his face an impassive mask. He seemed as trapped in this situation as she was, albeit for different reasons. "We're both playing a part," she thought, "but who is the real audience?" Qing paused, turning to face her, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "I've cleared the hospital bills for you," he said, his voice low. "How is that? Sincere enough?" Jinxie stared at him, taken aback by the unexpected gesture. She had expected indifference, not concern. "Yes," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." The words felt inadequate, yet they were all she could offer. The web of lies and obligations had already begun to spin, trapping them both in its intricate design. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the performance ahead. The show, it seemed, must go on. The opulent apartment shimmered, sunlight catching the crystal prisms dangling from the chandelier, scattering rainbows across the pristine white walls. Jinxie took a slow, deliberate breath, the faint scent of sandalwood clinging to the air. It was a far cry from the cramped, musty apartment she shared with her sister. Her stomach twisted with a familiar knot of anxiety. This was it. Her gilded cage. Gushi Qing stood by the expansive window, his back to her, a silhouette against the cityscape. He was a study in contradictions. The casual elegance of his attire belied the rigid set of his shoulders. He turned, his expression unreadable. Jinxie's heart hammered against her ribs. This charade was already taking its toll. "Now that the formalities are out of the way," he began, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the spacious room, "we need to discuss the specifics of our arrangement." He paused, his eyes flitting across her face, as if searching for a crack in her carefully constructed composure. Jinxie met his gaze, her own expression a mask of polite attentiveness. Inside, her thoughts raced. Formalities. Arrangement. Such sterile words for such a tangled web of deceit. He gestured towards a thick, leather-bound book lying on a low table. The cover was embossed with an intricate, almost archaic design. "This," he said, his voice laced with a hint of something she couldn't quite place, resignation. "Annoyance. Contains everything you need to know about me." Jinxie's eyebrows rose imperceptibly. "A whole book? What kind of man needed a manual for his own life?" She crossed the room, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floor, and picked up the heavy volume. Its weight felt oddly symbolic. She flipped it open, the pages crisp and new, filled with densely typed text. Her eyes scanned the first few lines. Date of birth. Blood type. Favorite color. It went on and on, a dizzying catalogue of seemingly insignificant details. You have to memorize all of these, including my hobbies and daily routines, Gushi Qing said, his voice flat, devoid of inflection. He watched her, his gaze intense, unwavering. Jinxie felt a shiver run down her spine. This wasn't just a contract, it was an immersion program. She was expected to become him, at least in the eyes of his grandmother. All of it? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The absurdity of the situation threatened to overwhelm her. She was supposed to memorize an entire encyclopedia of this man's life, all for the sake of a fabricated relationship. The weight of the book in her hands suddenly felt crushing. Every single detail, he emphasized, each word punctuated by a sharp, precise movement of his hand. If you can't memorize these terms and give yourself away someday in front of grandma, then you and everything you want will disappear. His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threat. Jinxie swallowed hard, the knot in her stomach tightening. She had known, on some level, that this wouldn't be easy. But the reality of it was far more daunting than she had anticipated. She thought of Chu Yangi, her sister, her face etched with worry, the medical bills piling up. She thought of her mother, lying in a hospital bed, her life hanging in the balance. This charade, this performance, was her only hope. She closed the book, the sound echoing in the vast room. I understand, she said, her voice steady, though her insides trembled. She met Gushi Qing's gaze, her own expression carefully neutral. I'll memorize it. He nodded, a flicker of something that might have been satisfaction crossing his features. He began to pace, his steps measured and precise, like a predator circling its prey. My grandmother is observant, he said, his voice low and thoughtful. She notices everything. The way someone holds their chopsticks. The inflection in their voice. The slightest hesitation. He stopped pacing and fixed her with a piercing stare. You cannot afford to slip up. Jinxie took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. I won't, she said, her voice firm. She had played many roles in her life, donned many masks. This one would just be more demanding. The afternoon stretched on, an endless parade of facts and figures, of likes and dislikes, of routines and rituals. Gushi Qing recited them, his voice monotonous, while Jinxie scribbled notes, her hand cramping. The apartment, which had initially seemed like a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, the silence punctuated only by the scratch of her pen and the occasional clearing of Gushi Qing's throat. He spoke of his obsession with even numbers, how everything in his life had to be balanced, symmetrical. He explained his aversion to certain textures, his preference for specific brands of coffee, his meticulously planned daily schedule. Each detail, no matter how trivial, was imbued with an almost religious significance. Jinxie listened, her mind racing, trying to absorb the sheer volume of information. It was like trying to drink from a fire hose. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, Gushi Qing finally stopped. He looked at Jinxie, his expression unreadable. That's enough for today, he said, his voice laced with fatigue. He turned and walked towards the window, his back to her once more. He stood there, silhouetted against the darkening sky, a figure of solitude and secrets. Jinxie closed her notebook, the pages filled with her frantic scribbles. She felt drained, exhausted, but also strangely exhilarated. She had taken the first step. She had entered the lion's den. And somehow, she was still standing. She looked at Gushi Qing's back, the lines of his shoulders rigid, tense. What secrets was he hiding? What demons haunted him? She didn't know. But she was determined to find out. The acrid scent of hairspray hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the saccharine smiles plastered on their faces. Jinxie tugged at the stiff, embroidered collar of the cheapao, the crimson silk clinging uncomfortably to her skin. Around her, the photo studio buzzed with activity assistants flitting about with reflectors, the photographer barking directions, and Gushi Ching, stiff and awkward in his traditional groom's attire, fidgeting with the jade button on his jacket. He smoothed it down twice, then once more for good measure. Even numbers, always. Jinxie's lips twitched. This charade was getting more ridiculous by the minute. She glanced at her reflection, a porcelain doll, a stranger in this opulent display of fabricated happiness. Just play the part, Jinxie, she told herself. Think of Chu Yangi, think of your mother. The thought of her sister's desperate plea, the weight of the hospital bills, tightened her chest. This was all for them. Ching avoided her gaze, his own thoughts a whirlwind of bewildered discomfort. He'd never imagined himself in this scenario, a mock wedding photo shoot for a relationship built on a contract. The absurdity of it all made him want to laugh, a hysterical, nervous laugh that threatened to bubble up from his throat. He swallowed it down, adjusting his collar again. Just get this over with, he thought, the familiar mantra echoing in his mind. His grandmother's expectant face flashed before him, a potent motivator. Peace and quiet, freedom from her relentless matchmaking, that was the prize. This elaborate performance was a small price to pay. Perfect. Just lean in a little closer, Mr. Gushi, NMS. He, a little more tenderness in the eyes, please, the photographer trilled, his voice overly enthusiastic. Jinxie forced a smile, tilting her head towards Ching. He stiffened, a faint blush creeping up his neck. The proximity, the forced intimacy, felt strangely unsettling. She could feel the tension radiating off him, a silent acknowledgement of the awkwardness hanging between them. Wonderful. Now, let's try a more playful pose. The photographer's relentless cheerfulness grated on Jinxie's nerves. Playful? How was she supposed to be playful with a man whose deepest desire seemed to be the perfect symmetry of a pair of cufflinks? She caught his eye, a flicker of shared discomfort passing between them. For a fleeting moment, the facade crumbled, and they were two strangers, trapped in a ridiculous pantomime. Then, just as quickly, the moment passed. He looked away, his expression once again carefully neutral. The endless cycle of poses continued, the demure bride, the adoring groom, the happy couple gazing lovingly into each other's eyes. Each click of the camera felt like a nail hammered into the coffin of her freedom. With each forced smile, the weight of the lie pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. Later, back at Ching's apartment, the silence was deafening. The stark, minimalist decor, dominated by clean lines and muted colors, reflected his personality, controlled, orderly, predictable. Everything in pairs, of course. 2 identical sofas, 2 matching lamps, even 2 sets of coasters arranged with meticulous precision. Jinxie suppressed a sigh. How was she supposed to live in this museum of even numbers? He cleared his throat, breaking the silence. The guest room is on the left, he said, his voice stiff and formal. Make yourself comfortable. Thank you, Jinxie replied, her voice equally strained. She dragged her suitcase towards the designated room, the wheels rolling silently on the polished floor. Inside, the same austere aesthetic prevailed. Even the decorative pillows on the bed were arranged in pairs. She closed her eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. Just one step at a time, she reminded herself. Get through this, and then you can figure out what's next. The visit to Qing's grandmother's house was an even more surreal experience. The elderly woman, her face etched with a network of wrinkles that spoke of a life well lived, greeted them with an enthusiasm that bordered on manic. She fussed over Jinxie, her hands fluttering like butterflies, tucking stray strands of hair behind her ear, straightening her collar. "Such a beautiful girl," she exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine delight. "Qing, you found a treasure." Qing, standing beside her, shifted uncomfortably. "Grandma, he began, but she cut him off. "Nonsense. I can see how much you love each other. The way you look at her," she beamed at them, oblivious to the carefully constructed facade. "Seeing you two love each other so much, I'm relieved." Her eyes twinkled with unshed tears. Jinxie's stomach churned with guilt. This sweet, unsuspecting woman was basking in the glow of a lie. A lie that Jinxie herself had helped create. She glanced at Qing, a silent plea for help. He avoided her gaze, his jaw tight. He, too, was trapped. "We've decided to set the date," his grandmother announced, her voice brimming with excitement. "Next month, on the 18th. It's an auspicious day." She clapped her hands together, a childlike glee lighting up her face. 18th. An even number, of course. Jinxie closed her eyes, the weight of the charade pressing down on her with renewed force. She was in too deep now. There was no turning back. The opulent high-end group office, a testament to Gushi Qing's success, felt sterile despite the warmth of the afternoon sun streaming through the panoramic windows. He tapped 2 fingers, always 2, never 1 or 3 on the polished mahogany desk, the rhythmic tapping a counterpoint to the silent turmoil within him. 24 resumes, each representing a potential escape from his grandmother's relentless matchmaking, lay scattered before him. He'd interviewed an absurd parade of women, a cloyingly sweet baker with flour dusting her eyelashes, a stern librarian who corrected his grammar, and a fitness instructor who insisted on demonstrating squats. None felt right. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind, "Qing, an even number is balance, harmony. Find a wife who brings balance to your life, not more chaos." Was such a woman even possible? Jinxie's resume, stark and elegant, was the last. He recalled her cool composure, her sharp wit that had danced around his odd interview questions with surprising grace. She hadn't flinched when he demanded she arrange a bowl of lychees into an even number, her fingers moving with a decisive swiftness that had momentarily stilled the anxious fluttering in his chest. He picked up the phone, a sudden urge to hear her voice again, to decipher the enigma behind those intelligent eyes. The hospital air hung heavy with the scent of antiseptic and despair. Jinxie stared at the stark white ceiling, the rhythmic beeping of the machines a morbid lullaby. Her sister, Chu Yanggi, sat beside her, her face etched with worry, her hand clutching Jinxie's. "I'm sorry, Jinxie," Yanggi whispered, her voice choked with guilt. "It's all my fault. I shouldn't have, I just didn't know what else to do." Jinxie squeezed her sister's hand, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. The throbbing pain in her leg was a dull ache compared to the sharp pang of guilt in her heart. She knew Yanggi was desperate, drowning in debt, their mother's surgery looming like a dark cloud. But this charade with Gushi Qing, this pretense of being someone she wasn't, felt like a dangerous game. She closed her eyes, the image of Gushi Qing's bewildered face flashing before her. His odd questions, his nervous tics, his almost childlike obsession with even numbers, he was a puzzle she hadn't intended to solve, a path she hadn't meant to tread. A gentle knock startled her. Fu Boya, the man who had collided with her scooter, his kind eyes filled with concern, entered the room. "How are you feeling, Missy?" he asked, his voice soft. He turned to Yanggi, his expression hardening slightly. "I caused Missy's accident. So, it's my duty to look after her here." Yangi's eyes widened, a flicker of fear in their depths. Jinxie watched the exchange, a strange premonition settling in her gut. Gushi Qing's apartment, a testament to his obsession with order and even numbers, felt oddly comforting to Jinxie. The furniture was arranged in perfect symmetry, the books on the shelves meticulously aligned. Even the number of throw pillows on the sofa adhered to his peculiar rule. She sat on the edge of the plush sofa, her suitcase at her feet, a strange sense of displacement washing over her. This was it. She was officially Gushi Qing's contract girlfriend. The absurdity of the situation threatened to overwhelm her, yet a strange sense of calm prevailed. She needed this. She needed the money to save her mother, to pull Yangi out of the quicksand of debt. Gushi Qing stood by the window, his back to her, his shoulders stiff. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. He turned, his gaze searching hers. I understand your situation," he began, his voice hesitant, devoid of its usual briskness. He had learned of her predicament, not through her, but through Fu Boya, who, it turned out, was more than just a kind stranger. He was a silent observer, a protector of sorts, and a connection she hadn't anticipated. The revelation had surprised Qing, chipping away at the carefully constructed walls of his ordered world. He saw a vulnerability in her, a strength masked by desperation, that resonated with a hidden part of himself. Jinxie met his gaze, her heart pounding against her ribs. She hadn't expected him to understand, to see beyond the facade she had so carefully constructed. "I'm relieved if you live well," he said, the words simple, yet weighted with an unspoken understanding. The relief that washed over Jinxie was palpable, a tangible release of the tension that had coiled tight within her. She offered a small, hesitant smile, a genuine smile that reached her eyes, a smile he hadn't seen before. It was a smile that hinted at a resilience he admired, a quiet strength that intrigued him. In that moment, the carefully constructed walls between them seemed to crumble, replaced by a fragile bridge of shared vulnerability. The contract, a formal document outlining the absurd terms of their agreement, lay on the coffee table between them. It was a symbol of the charade they were about to embark on, a testament to the desperate circumstances that had brought them together. Yet, as they looked at each other, a silent acknowledgement passed between them. This was more than just a contract. It was a beginning, a tangled web of secrets and lies, of unexpected connections and unforeseen consequences. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with potential pitfalls and hidden dangers. But for the first time since the accident, Jinxie felt a flicker of hope, a fragile ember glowing in the darkness. Perhaps, just perhaps, this strange, improbable arrangement could be more than just a means to an end. Perhaps it could be a chance for both of them to find something they hadn't even known they were looking for. The opulent apartment, bathed in the soft glow of evening light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, felt sterile. Gushi Qing paced, the polished marble floor cold against his bare feet. His grandmother's parting words echoed in his ears, a constant reminder of his perceived inadequacy, his single status. 2 grandchildren, 2 marriages, she declared, her voice a mixture of pleading and command. Everything in pairs, Qing. It's the natural order. He ran a hand through his hair, the weight of expectation heavy. Even numbers, his obsession, suddenly felt like a suffocating constraint. He stopped before the panoramic view of the city, the twinkling lights a chaotic, uneven sprawl. The irony wasn't lost on him. A soft knock on the door broke his reverie. Jinxie stood there, a suitcase at her feet, an almost imperceptible tremor in her hand as she gripped the handle. He found her stillness intriguing, a stark contrast to the swirling chaos he felt inside. He'd chosen her almost on a whim. Her quiet confidence during the bizarre interview, her almost detached demeanor, had struck him as different. Different from the giggling, overly eager women who'd paraded before him, each vying for the role of his temporary fiancée. Jinxie, however, hadn't seemed to care much for the charade. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, had held a flicker of something he couldn't quite decipher. Perhaps amusement? Or was it calculation? He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "Come in." His voice was flat, betraying none of the turbulent thoughts churning beneath the surface. She entered, her steps measured and graceful. The apartment, despite its grandeur, suddenly felt smaller, her presence filling the space in a way the previous candidates hadn't. He watched her, a strange mix of curiosity and unease settling within him. Her gaze swept over the room, taking in the minimalist decor, the stark white walls, the carefully arranged furniture. He wondered what she thought of it, of him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being assessed, weighed, measured. "Your grandmother, she seems eager." Jinxie finally spoke, her voice low and melodious. Qing's lips twisted into a wry smile. "Eager is an understatement. She'd marry me off to a potted plant if it meant fulfilling her quota of 2 grandchildren, 2 marriages." He could feel his grandmother's disapproval radiating from the very walls, a tangible pressure despite her absence. Jinxie placed her suitcase down, the soft thud echoing in the silent apartment. "So, this is it then? I'm officially your contract girlfriend." The term felt strange, foreign on her tongue. "Officially," he confirmed, his gaze meeting hers. "For the next 6 months, you're Jinxie, my soon-to-be fiancé." "And I," he added, a strange tightness in his chest, "am yours." Jinxie's eyes flickered, a fleeting emotion crossing her face before she masked it again. Relief? Perhaps even a hint of vulnerability? He pushed the thought aside. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. He needed to remember that. "The contract stipulates a separate room, correct?" she inquired, her tone carefully neutral. "Yes, of course," he replied, gesturing towards the hallway. "The second door on the left. Make yourself comfortable. Dinner will be in an hour." He turned away, needing a moment to collect his thoughts, to reconcile the surreal reality of this situation. Gushi Qing, a man of logic and precision, had just hired a fake girlfriend to appease his overzealous grandmother. The absurdity of it was almost comical. Jinxie moved towards the designated room, the wheels of her suitcase rolling silently against the marble. She closed the door behind her, the soft click echoing in the sudden quiet. She leaned against the cool wood, taking a deep breath. The apartment, with its sterile elegance, felt like a gilded cage. But it was a cage that offered a temporary reprieve, a chance to breathe, to strategize. Her sister, Chu Yangi, her voice tight with desperation, echoed in her mind, "Mama needs the surgery, Jinxie. Please. Just do this." Guilt twisted in her gut. This charade, this pretense, was her only option. An hour later, they sat across from each other at the dining table, the silence thick with unspoken words. The housekeeper served dinner, her movements precise and efficient. A steaming bowl of soup was placed before Jinxie. She tentatively lifted a spoonful to her lips, the aroma rich and savory. It was surprisingly good, a comforting warmth spreading through her. But after a few more sips, she felt a strange heat building in her chest, spreading to her face. "Did you eat something wrong?" Qing asked, his brow furrowed in concern. His voice, though still formal, held a hint of genuine worry. Jinxie placed the spoon down, her hand trembling slightly. "I ate Grandma's soup," she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. "It's so hot." Her face flushed crimson, beads of sweat forming on her forehead. Qing's eyes widened in understanding. His grandmother's infamous love soup, a concoction designed to ignite passion and fertility, was legendary in the family. He'd forgotten to warn her. A strange mix of amusement and guilt washed over him. This was going to be an interesting 6 months. He watched as Jinxie struggled to compose herself, the unexpected spice of the soup adding an unforeseen layer of complexity to their already complicated arrangement. He couldn't help but wonder what other surprises lay ahead. The sterile apartment, once a symbol of his solitary existence, suddenly felt charged with a different kind of energy,